Good noon. It's joyful Christian Hermit, and I'm hanging in here with my illness. It's gotten into the lungs, which happens. So the nurse just called, and the doctor's out, and he's out, evidently out of country or something where he can't call something in. So I started another round of antibiotic and know the red flags if it gets into being pneumonia or something, but that's the way it goes. And I've been reminding myself of all the good that my suffering can bring. So and last night though, couple of viewers have given me this thought, but one in particular of asking, because I've wondered still if I had been cursed by Anastasia. It was in a previous video of a woman in the south of France who, the whole thing, she was so demonic, the truest demoniac I've been around, and held me against my will in her apartment. But that morning had also take something, a black cube, like it was like a smoldering square of charcoal from her lung, went into my lung. And I saw it with inner sight. It's hard to describe, but it was just like seeing it come out of her lung and right across into mine. And and then I got sick after that. Of course, I escaped by the grace of God only. It's a very miraculous story, but she would have killed me. There's this huge spear gun by her door, and she wasn't letting me go. I'd try to get up, she would shove me back down, and she had superhuman strength. She spoke multiple languages. Her eyes changed during the course of her keeping me there. And she'd invited me to lunch, and I wasn't going to go, but anyway, the story's in another video. She seemed okay at first, but then I noticed things even with church, that she couldn't be in church. She fled out, and the priest didn't like her. It was angry and shouted at her to leave. So, I'm just somehow so trusting and naive. And I think God has gotten fed up with me, frankly. And Padre Pio, I think he has years ago. But anyway, this viewer last night mentioned that I ought to ask St. Pio to heal me and to cast out this evil, because I think I was cursed by her. But priests have said no, that I wasn't cursed. And the one who actually saved my life through supernatural means and the Mass, having a Mass and having its intentions for me, because God let him know that my life was going to be in danger. So it's quite a story. Anyway, so he said no, and I was in confession when I was talking to him about it later, after we'd each gotten back to Vienna. So, and he's an excellent priest, and then other priests, my bishop, the priest when I got back home, said no, but I was given blessings. Confession is next best thing to an exorcism, a good confession. I've had many confessions since then, but I still wondered, because I get this illness every year, except last year was the first in years. Since 2009 I've been getting them. Or no, 2008 it was 2008. I asked Padre Pio last night, put holy water on me and prayed, and asked him again to forgive me, because he had warned me about in 1997 of something, a trick of the devil coming, and I didn't. I was too weak, and I got tricked by the devil in a bad way. Now, Jesus brought it all to much good, gave me an opportunity to show strength, and I did. I learned my lesson. learned what Jesus wanted of me. And so I'm all forgiven, but it was a horrible, horrible way the devil tricked me, even though I had been forewarned, see, by Padre Pio. And I haven't had anything from Padre Pio that I know since. And he used to come to me now and then in dreams or, tell me things or, so I felt like I had really offended him. And he was done, done with the old lady. But I asked him last night, and I wasn't healed, and nothing happened, of any that I knew about, of any kind of a curse broken. I don't think I'm cursed now. I really don't. But there's consequences. We can have consequences to sin even. But also, I prayed last night that if it's not a curse, this illness that I get, then explain to me, more about victim soul, or, if it's that, help me know if that's that for sure, that I'm a victim soul. And victim souls do suffer. And you tend to suffer in ways that are sort of uncanny suffering. But I woke up many times during the night. I always do. I doze off, wake up, doze off. And I was reminded of being told, well, actually, Dr. H was asking questions years ago when God and other holy ones were speaking, and he was tape recording. And he had never experienced anything like that before, and I hadn't either. But he asked God, would there be a healing for me? Because he said, I could be doing so much good, he said, if I were healed and all. And God said, no, that while on earth I shall know earthly pain. So that was reminded to me in the night. While on earth you shall know earthly pain. And so I am back to what I have been told many times in different ways, spiritually, and then through temporal means also, that, and of course from my death experience, that God does not view suffering in the way that we view it. He just does not. It's powerful. I mentioned how powerful it can be, through energy even. And its affinity with love and suffering, suffering and love. Both energies, both with tremendous power and force, physical. It's part of what casts out demons. It's part of what heals people, is love. And suffering is very intermingled with love. You don't have love, you can't really love fully if you don't suffer, if you haven't suffered. They go together. And so, anyway, it's just part of life and part of love and suffering in our lives. So, we'll just see, what happens, but I'm back more focused on the victim soul, and I know it's not familiar to many people, victim soul, being a victim soul, but Padre Pio was. That's why I sort of wondered, how Padre Pio would take to my request, because he was a victim soul. Jesus suffered. He was a victim of love. Jesus is called a victim of love, of God's Son who suffered. So we just have to go in faith, really, and try to trust what God has placed for us to do in our lives, what he has chosen for us. And not everyone is going to be chosen for the same type of of actions in life, assignments, we could call them. I call them assignments. So there have been many victim souls. What is the one young woman's name? She, rather than to be raped, she jumped out of a window and broke her back and never walked again. Trying to think of her name. Some of you are shouting it at me, I'm sure. But Alexandrina. Now that kind of forgetfulness comes from my head injury. It's this. I smacked at this verbal area, and I've noticed over the years that it happens. And then if I think a little bit, it'll come in a minute or two. The word or the name will come. Blessed Alexandrina. She might be a saint now. And so she was a victim soul. Others were. Therese Neumann, another one of the 19th century, 20th century was Therese Neumann. And Blessed Catherine Emmerich. And Catherine Emmerich. She had tremendous visions and different things, but she was bedridden with increasingly and finally totally bedridden. But she was a victim soul, a victim of love of God. I offered myself years ago, but I really, in looking back at my life, even as a youngster, God was forming me to suffer. I would have oddball things happen. Shot in the head. Right here was shot in the head. It was an air rifle from a distance, but it penetrated the bone right in here, bled, but it didn't get into the brain or anything. But it was a rifle, a 22 or something like that, at a distance. It was at a distance. It didn't kill me whatsoever. Obviously, wasn't even put in the hospital, but the police came. My little girlfriend, we were going to practice our clarinets. I was carrying my little clarinet, still have it, and went to her house to practice, and I was sobbing because I saw the man's rifle out the window. As I walked by, I just glanced up and saw it, and boom. And I realized I'd been shot. I felt it right in this bone here. It's right there. Still have like an indentation. But it wasn't a high rifle, obviously. He was sent away for 6 months. He hadn't had any other previous. He had lost his job that day and had just decided he was going to shoot at the first person who walked by. He had a room he rented, upstairs room, so it was at a distance and at an angle. I was walking along the street, but weird, and it was just about a month or 6 weeks after I'd had corrective eye surgery. I had strabismus, so one eye, I would just use one eye or the other, and the other one would float out. You've seen people with that. My eldest daughter inherited it. And I had her operated on. I think she was in the 4th grade, and it was traumatic for her. She's very sensitive. So she refused. It came back then as she got older. Often you have to have it a couple of times. My surgery was in 8th grade, and fortunately it held pretty well. But I still just I just look with one eye though, but it doesn't move. So anyway, so that was just shortly after that, just the timing. It was so close to my eye. It was just unusual. I would keep having these things. Surgeries that wouldn't go right even when I was 20 years old and stuff. So there was always something of suffering for me. Even as a little child, I remember having something that I would vomit blood. When I was maybe 3 years old or 4, I remember being very ill. Maybe scarlet something, I think. Scarlet fever, scarlatina, something like that. But But otherwise, my cousin sent me some videos that her dad was a great photographer when they were visiting at our lake place, and I just saw them the other day. She sent them on the phone, and I was a hale and hearty little child, and all growing up, well fed, healthy, but would get different sicknesses or different odd things that would happen. Weird things, not good things, bad. Devil involved, too, things like that. So we just have to trust God. But I've mentioned victim soul before to people, and maybe I should talk about it more. Let me know. I don't encourage it because it's something that God chooses. But people who have a lot of illness or very well likely maybe are being chosen, but they aren't aware. But in general, it's always a good thing to offer our suffering as prayer. That can be emotional suffering or whatever kind of suffering. Mental suffering, temporal sufferings of situations that happen, accidents or whatever it could be, temporary sufferings. I developed a whole different categories of types of temporal souls. Of victim souls, even supportive victim souls, those who are married or have children or parents who are ill, and they're taking care of them and they're being supportive. Say, married with someone who has a disorder or a mental illness that they can't help on medication or whatever, but the other person's life changes. And the other person has a choice of staying with or leaving, sadly, in our time period. And at all time periods they did. And some would leave. They couldn't take it. Being with someone or totally disabled or bedridden for years. I know of a man who stayed with his wife faithfully and I'm not sure what it was she had. Might have been MS that she got or something, but it went very rapidly and she was permanently disabled, but had her mind. But he cared for her for like 30 or 40 years. She lived well into old age. And then she passed and he fell in love with a very healthy woman, had maybe 6 months. They married, 6 months of delightful times, active times. They were out having lunch with another couple, and he died of a massive heart attack right then and there. But he'd had 6 months of a lot of fun with his second wife after his first wife passed. And he loved his first wife. He cared for her and was a wonderful, holy person to do that too. Because many don't. I know of a man growing up. He divorced his wife and she went into a nursing home when she had MS. Or Parkinson's maybe, which I think it was MS. He had children still in high school and elementary school or junior high, and divorced his wife, and she agreed to it, though. She decided that would be okay, and she would just go to a nursing home to live. But as a child, when my dad mentioned that, was talking about it with my mom, my sisters were in college, I heard a lot more than I would have had there been other kids in the home. I sort of became a little adult with them. Even with my mother, she would talk a lot of things over with me. But it was so I had this sense of understanding, a gift the Holy Spirit, we all have it, but I embraced it early on. So I guess my mom and dad felt very comfortable discussing things, but I never felt good about that man. Still, and he I think he was already, when he was still married, though, got back together with his high school sweetheart who had, her husband had either died or she'd been divorced or something. And I just didn't like it. I thought, not good character, finish up, But his wife knew, and his sick wife did. And I could see that it was better for her, better to be in the nursing home, but it's a small town away from him if he was going to be courting this other woman on the side, adulterizing her. So anyway, but they married then, and both of them had a longer life, married to each other. But I just thought, what a poor example to his children also, although his first wife talked with the children, and she took it as her bitter pill, I guess, part of her illness to, what could she do? So that was a situation that she was a victim soul, whether she recognized it or not, at different levels, not only through her MS, and then she did die, maybe she was in her 50s, but I think people, if she'd been loved and cared for by her husband, she would have lived longer. I think people can die also from broken hearts. I've known of people who, the doctors would say that was all they could think of, was their heart was broken. Couldn't find any other reasons for their passing. Grief and sorrow, rejection. So, but all of those, see that situation. The woman was noble. She was realistic. What could she do? She made a choice then that at least she'd be taken care of by people who cared. Not by a husband who didn't care and who wished to be with this other woman and resented it. But then on the fair side, he didn't have it in him. He did not have that nobility. So he was honest with himself, evidently, and with her, that he couldn't live that kind of life, and didn't mind his kids seeing him in that light. So that was quite an interesting hearing my dad talking about it. He was matter of fact, but stunned. This man was a very good friend. He remained friends. They played golf and all that. That was always something to him. That my dad was brought up by a mother who had a lot of character, and right from wrong. My dad knew right from wrong, and so that stuck out to him. Found it startling, to say the least. But my dad wasn't one to judge or condemn, which, unfortunately, I think I tend more to, I get a little bit more condemnatory. I'm more upset, I get more black and white on things sometimes. I understand, but I still, I would definitely say that was poor character. He lacked character. He lacked the ability to strive for something higher of himself, the man who left his wife when she was sick. But then I know from my situation, it was the accident that precipitated immediately. My husband said he didn't want to be married anymore. Well, within 3 weeks of the accident. So, and I was just, at that time, didn't know it was going to be a lifelong thing whatsoever. And in all honesty, my discs weren't that terrible immediately. They were bad, but not, I could live with it. But having all the work and the care of the little boy, he weighed, he got He was a toddler, but he was a good little sized little guy. And working, and the 3 children, and getting moved. And it was harder on my back, not having any help. So that made it worse. What was already injured in the accident got worse then. And it might not have been, probably wouldn't have been, or at least not that soon. But it was all laid out. In my situation, I saw God at work in it. With the death experience, with my not getting better, because God had given me forewarning dreams that I wouldn't be teaching again. And I thought, what? Because I didn't like teaching. But I thought, well, I'll have to do that. I'll have to teach until the children are old enough that I won't need to be home right after school. Then I could get into administration or some even curriculum development, something more creative and more that would be suitable for how I am. And so, and even not standing all day on concrete was hard on the back and my neck. So God, though, kept showing me that I wouldn't be teaching. And I thought, what? And I was starting to think of all these other jobs. What else would I be doing? What kind of career? That's why I started working on the psychology, because I could lay in a recliner even and talk to people, listen to them and help them. But no, he intended for me to be a stay-at-home mother. So I was fully disabled by pain. And it was a cross to bear. There was a price to pay. But I recognized that God valued that and wanted that for me. And the added suffering also. Because I think he understood that I would grasp it then. And the first priest is the one who told me I was a victim soul. Right off when I told him some of my life, even then. And he gave me the book of Sister Josefa Menendez, The Way of Divine Love. She was a victim soul, is a victim soul. And I read her autobiography and of her writings, and had a great affinity to her. And the picture of her inside the book, the photo, she died in 1923. She died on December 29th. I celebrate that every year. I just did this year too. Honor her. She's also, I took her as my confirmation saint. She's not a saint, but she is. She won't be, probably, because her religious community has more dwindled, and it takes a lot of money. They don't have the money to propel her. But with her writing, I'm hoping someday she will be honored. But not that she cares. She wouldn't care. No, none of them care if they're a saint or not. That's not how heaven works. They don't have that need at all. But we do. We evidently do. And it's good for us to have examples of people who are noble and of high character, and who suffer what they suffer and suffer it well. And who, when they do have suffering, they agree with God and offer all that energy and power and love to God. And embrace the suffering with love, like Jesus embraced the cross with love. For the higher purpose of suffering, when we understand the higher purpose of suffering and the connection of suffering and love and the holiness involved, then we begin to grasp that a victim of love is another name for victim soul, to be a victim of love. So that's a little bit more about it. And Padre Pio did not say anything to me. I was only reminded in the night of what God had said to Dr. H. years in 1988, June of 1988, when he asked, wouldn't I ever be healed? Think of all I could do for God. And God said, And I had even asked at one point, but Dr. H asked this time, and it was what he was told. While on earth she shall know earthly pain. So here we go. You know, the nurse called today, and the doctor won't be in till Monday, and told me warning signs for pneumonia if I get a high fever or pain or things like that, something more severe. But I started, and maybe I need a different antibiotic. Maybe my body has gotten too used to azithromycin, even though I didn't take it last year. It's been 2 years, at least 2 years, but at least it's holding its own, and I'm not at death's door that I know of. We never know the day nor the hour. So, suffer well as we can, nobly, with love. Yes, I went through a grumpy phase of this because it's an inconvenience. I wanted to get more done. I'm weakened now. I'm going to have to work harder to build back up. And I wasn't built up before, but I was trying. From being sick before with pain and just all these things that happened to me. So I am a primary victim soul. That's primary. That's my main. I'm a main sufferer. Suffering is a huge part of my life. Then there's secondary victim souls. That would be people who are have something that doesn't take them totally out of interactive temporal life, but yet they suffer all the time. But it's a secondary type of a suffering, some kind of an ailment like asthma or there's all kinds of things. Crohn's disease, unless it gets severe, but they can still work, they can still have families, but it's a suffering indeed that's there all the time, but hasn't reduced them to bed yet, or won't. Some of these ailments will not. Then, such as depression, clinical depression, with medication, people can work and do different things, and some can't though. If it's too far gone, plus includes something like anxiety disorder with it, I would call one of my sisters probably a primary victim soul, or between secondary and primary, definitely secondary. She functions well and all, but not in other ways. The depression was very severe, clinical, and she's on medication, but also has the anxiety disorder with it. So, and then got lymphoma, and that shook her so badly that she doesn't go out. She's very fearful because her immune system's low, for one thing. So she has a right to be fearful, doesn't want to get sick, obviously. And the lymphoma's been in remission for, I think, 4 years now, at least. Or 5, maybe it's been since her diagnosis. But even having chemotherapy was very upsetting to her, very nerve-wracking for her because of her suffering, the anxiety disorder. So I think she was born with melancholia, from my earliest memories. So, and she didn't get medication until after she was married. So, didn't know. We all knew that she was sad. It was more we were trying to cheer her up and things, and my mom didn't realize that it was, something that needed treating. But thankfully she did as an adult then, and got the necessary help and medications. Thanks be to God for medications. So, then there is temporary victim souls, break an arm, break a leg, have a surgery, lays you up, but you're going to get better, but during the time you're laid up, or the pain that you're in, like a car accident or something, that you will recover from. Offer that suffering. Learn to suffer well that as a temporary victim soul. Then I mentioned a supportive victim soul, that one man had an opportunity to be a supportive victim soul with his wife, who was a primary victim soul with her MS that had gotten to a point that she could not function well. But the other man was a tremendously wonderful supportive victim soul with his wife all through until her natural passing, when she was an elderly woman, and himself also. And then it seems like there was one other category I had created. God gave me the insight to do for these types of victim souls. So, just how it is. Anyway, onward and forward and upward we go. God bless His real presence in us. And in my blog, I have a blog on victim souls. You can read about it there. I have different categories and different topics in that blog. It's blogger.com, Victim Soul of Sacred Heart of Jesus, I think it's called. I did a lot of writing on it. And then I have a book on victim souls. I didn't write it, but it's from the late 1800s, early 1900s. The church used to have there would be more associations of victim souls. But then that got poo-pooed, laid down, because you don't want to encourage people who don't, people can get sick, psychological illnesses and get into it too much that way. It can become unhealthy. It needs to be something natural, and that and that your spiritual director also has helped discern that or has figured out that, like I was a convert, and this first priest just hearing, he says, you're a victim soul. And then I also had sufferings. I had interior stigmata from time to time, where you feel the pains, like in my hands or my feet or side. Or I'd have crown of thorn pain, a circle around here, just awful. That was what I was having that night that I had the dream that this big halo, kind of metal halo, was around me, and the angel was just tightening it and tightening it. Well, that was my crown of thorn pain while I was asleep. Not enough to wake me up, but I had that dream. And I complained, and she says, but you agreed to this. And in the dream, I said, yes, I had. I realized I had. I had agreed. I had offered myself then. I had accepted God's having me as a victim soul. And when you do that, though, you must be prepared and understand that it hurts, that you are going to have suffering. And that's why, like this one, I know, and you don't necessarily need to just think it's the greatest thing, because we have other things we want to do. We're very selfish people. I am anyway. And I had plans of, I was going to have these windows trimmed out, and clean up more of my mess. I had been starting to work on it. I was building up energy and some muscle again. And it all fell apart 2 weeks ago. So, and it's suffering. But I had to, get in gear and remind myself, this is my work. This is my vocation. This is my job for God. And of the power in it, I had another mess up with my laptop. That's something I'd ordered from Amazon. Of all things, went to my son's address. My laptop will just do goofy things. And so I did send a text to his wife. Surprised she responded. That's a first in 2 years. But I asked if they had gotten his toothbrush power base. My toothbrush had died out, my electric toothbrush. Oh, yeah, but we threw it out, didn't know what it was for. And I said, well, that's fine, just forget it. I reordered, but I checked through to see if, I said, my laptop somehow keeps reverting to their address because I sent them a puzzle. But I sent other people things, and it doesn't keep going to their address. So I also take that as a reminder to pray for them. And because, why that address? Why my son, the one who's cut me off and his wife had? And I found out from someone else that she's not quite as she had presented herself with me over the phone and different things. So I got a little different picture. So yes, more prayer needed. And praying for her parents, her sweet parents, who were horrified by their wedding. And I've heard about their wedding. I was not invited, and I guess it was as well. I don't think I would have been able to stay in it. It's very sacrilegious, very blasphemous. So, my son's in trouble. So that'll be the next video I want to share. And I don't know what more to do for him. I've prayed. Then you get to the point where you're just like, Lord, take it, can't do anything more. But I'm reminded, so I need to keep praying. And I do wear a t-shirt he had from high school. That's sort of like a telekinesthetic praying I do, but more on that later. So you know some about victim souls now. A little more about it. And it's something that you would know, your spiritual director would help you. But in any kind of suffering, even the most temporary of sufferings, even of a disappointment you have in life, offer that. It's energy and power. Put it with prayer. It will enhance prayer. It is powerful. Powerful. Suffering is. And it's good. Don't consider it negative. It's easy to. I still do at times. This yuck, I want it over with. But I can't get anything different. The doctor's not in. I have to suffer it out here. So I will. And I'm going to, with increased awareness again and gratitude, and unite my sufferings with Christ and other people's sufferings. Of course, I know other people suffer far, far more than me. Even my arachnoiditis. There are people who have it who are far worse off than me with arachnoiditis. Far worse. So I'm very aware of that. I've been very blessed, very fortunate. God bless His real presence in us.